your guide for
This
this
meeting is being
afternoon's
recorded.
broadcast of the IDPD celebration. You'll be hearing from a cast of amazing speakers, panelists, and performers, each an expert in their own right, each living life to their fullest. This presentation of the IDPD celebration will also be available afterwards on the AMI Audio Live podcast feed. I am delighted to introduce DM LaFortune. DM LaFortune is a Toronto-based creator and horizon dancer of Cree, Métis, European, and Jewish heritage. She was called to the Ontario Bar in 1996. After several years of teaching, she developed Decolonizing the Heart workshops. Utilizing forum theater in her work, she exposed herself to the theater bug and got bit. Shortly thereafter, she began full-time theater studies. She's recently toured with an international touring company, Theater of the Beat. DM is joining us today to provide our land acknowledgement as we get things underway this afternoon. DM, thank you very much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. I'm also a person living with multiple disabilities, so I don't know if I mentioned that. Melanie probably did. So since I'm going to begin now, is everybody ready? Since time immemorial, Indigenous nations have known and loved the North Shore of Niigani, Gichigami, Lake Ontario. The land has held the stories and hopes of groups including the Haudenosaunee, Wyandot, Neutro, and Mississauga, which is the Anishinaabe. In recent centuries, the perpetrators of colonial violence sought to erase those stories and disregard the treaty relationships established over generations. I myself, a Treaty 6 Plains Cree and Jewish woman, acknowledge that we are not from this land and acknowledge that we have benefited from the breaking of promises and the theft of land. We are learning the history of these lands and committing to being part of a future where Indigenous sovereignty is honored. We seek guidance through the principles of the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and we seek to be good neighbors along with all those who love this land. We are all treaty people. That's it. And I borrowed much of that from my church, which is really on top of things like this. So I want to thank them for having this, and I altered it a little bit. So this is the land, we must respect it. And those who have been here before now, we know up to 30,000 years.
Elder DM LaFortune for that land acknowledgement. Good afternoon once again, and welcome to the 7th Annual International Day for Persons with Disabilities Conference. I'd like to thank our proud sponsors for today, Baker McKenzie LLP, Canadian Council of the Blind, and TRAILBLAZERS Tandem Cycling Club. My name is Minette Samaru, and I would like to introduce you to our Master of Ceremony who will take you through today. Marcia Yale was born totally blind and started elementary school at Ontario School for the Blind, where she learned to read and write Braille. She eventually returned to her own neighborhood, where she completed and graduated high school. Marcy loves technology since started working with computer in 1987. She has no fear. She always says there's always the cancel button, Alt F4, or the power button if things get out of control. In 2016, she received her first refreshable braille display, which she pairs with her iPhone and is able to freely read. She has been volunteering for the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians since 2001 and became the president in 2020, of which she currently holds that post. She's also the chair of the board of the Broadcasting Accessibility Fund. Marcy's proudest moment since losing her husband was graduation day at Guide Dogs for the Blind. That was in 2017, where she brought her precious guide dog back to her adopted hometown. Welcome, Marcy Yale, and I will now hand over to you.
Thank you. All right. Okay. It's been one of those days. Welcome everyone. I'm your MC for the day, and last minute I'm also going to be your panel moderator. So you're going to get sick of me. I'm going to get sick of me. But the first thing we're going to talk about quickly, really quickly, are just Zoom etiquette. Please do not unmute. I was going to lock the mute and I didn't, so please do not unmute unless you have been recognized. When we get to questions and answers, and there will be a lot of time for that with it throughout the afternoon, we will do raise hands. You can also put things in the chat, and Michael will be monitoring the chat. So if you can send things only to Michael, that would be really good, because he's the one that's going to be monitoring it. I'm not a chat aficionado. So when it's time to unmute on a Windows PC, it's Alt A for the screen reader users. For the mouse users, I don't know what you do. On a Mac, it's Command Shift A. And again, for those of you who are screen reader users, and on a smartphone, it moves around, but it's usually at the bottom left of the screen, and it's a toggle. All three of those are toggles. So what mutes you unmutes you. And to raise hand on a Windows PC, it's Alt Y. And anyone can use these keyboard commands. It's Option Y on the Mac, and on the smartphone, it could be under reactions, or it could be under more, or it could be under your name on the participants list, depending on what version of Zoom you have. So that's it. My captioner is up and running, I hope. I think we finally got that straightened out. Can you just say yes or no, Kelly, when things are good? And I think she put as well a link in the chat for those of you who would rather use captions on another screen. So as Minette said, I'm totally blind, so the captions are something that I just want to have happen, but they don't help me. Okay. We're doing well. So I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, and her name is Janet Rodriguez, and her pronouns are she and her. And she did this description. So she says she is a racialized cisgender immigrant woman Her own journey of illness and disability forced her to continuously interact with a healthcare system full of barriers, not only physical structures, but also policies and attitudes that exclude people with lived experience of disability. Janet actively participates in cross-disability organizing in healthcare, education, and anti-poverty work at a national scale, and with her Latin American community and the GTA Disability Coalition and ERDCO locally. Janet has been one of the founding organizers of the Toronto Disability Pride March since 2011. She is a professional language interpreter and has postgrad certificates in adult education and HR management. And take it away, Janet. And you should be able to unmute yourself. And I'm not hearing you.
Mute. Okay. It's only been 3 years, folks. So unlike Marcia, technology is, I'm allergic to technology. So thank you very, very much.
Okay, well, there you go. And Michael is handling your polls, so just let him know what you need.
So is somebody running the slides, or do you want me to, or how does that work?
Oh, yes, you can share your screen because I don't know if I have a PowerPoint to run.
Okay, that's not a problem. I have them here, and let me see. So thank you very much, everyone, but especially the Alliance, all the organizers. I know that it is the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians who, coordinates everyone, but I know there's many other organizations and volunteers in putting this together. And I know this because I was part of the organizing group before. So let me see if I can share this, present. Yes, okay. So I can, let's see, where am I? I do apologize because this is it's a little different for me. Okay, yes, I got it. Or maybe I didn't get it. In any case, I just wanted to tell you a little bit. Thank you for that presentation. I wanted to tell you folks that I am hoping that what we're going to do is to have a participatory type of what I mean is I just don't want to be the only one, the only voice speaking. So there's the polls. There's going to be a little bit of a heads up when the polls come in. So don't worry, we're going to give you plenty of time for that. Okay, so I'm sharing. I've only done this like for the last 3 years, but I continue to. Okay. So Chrome tab. There we go. I hope you're seeing my presentation. Can somebody give me a verbal okay?
We have it.
You have it? Can you see it?
We can.
Okay, fantastic. So I missed it. Okay. So today, this is what I want to share with you is we're facing forward the 21st century. And as a person with a disability who intersects daily or weekly at least with the healthcare system, but daily with my issues, my personal issues of health and disability, I've learned to, from my peers, to advocate for my own personal care, but also I've learned to advocate in general for the inclusion of disability and anti-ableism, both in the healthcare system and in the medical education. I thought, I can talk to my doctor and maybe they'll get it today. But in fact is that there's a lot of new doctors being trained today, and they are not necessarily aware of what these issues of disabilities are. So, like DM, I would like to acknowledge the space that I'm occupying here in Turtle Island. I'm greeting you all from Takaronto, Treaty 13, and more precisely from Adobigog. Many of us know it as Etobicoke. This is an Anishinaabe Moin word that means where the elders grow. Marcia mentioned that I am an interpreter and translator. So for me, if a word doesn't have any meaning, I need to know what that is. And I did not know what elders were. So the image that you see is a branch of an elder tree, and it has bright green leaves. It has some dark cones. These are the mature cones. And the other branch has smaller, bright green, skinny cones, and these are the new ones. People actually use this for healing purposes, and they also use them for ornaments, especially now during the holidays. So it would be nice to know, and I'm gonna ask my co-presenters to check for what people put on the chat. But I would love if you can put in the chat like where you located while I continue with my presentation. It would be nice for all of us to know where we're hailing from. So in let's see, does this go down? Yes. So today's conversation is going to be formatted in a way, as you can see, the numbers go 4, 3, 2, 1, and that is because I want to leave us all with the idea that we need to recognize our expertise, our knowledge of either an impairment, illness, of different kinds of disability, and we are the only ones who know this. That is valuable information. And when we are seeking care, the physician, the nurse, the therapist that I see, they are experts in what they studied in school. What they studied in school was disease, pathology, symptoms. I am the expert on having to live with those symptoms and the disabilities that my chronic illnesses have caused. Another point that I also want to talk about is what we can do. I believe in action. So what we can do and what is our role in mainstreaming disability. We're also going to talk about words because words matter. And because I love words, I'm a linguist, I'm a translator, and I'm just going to briefly share some definitions, which I'm sure many of you already are familiar with. It just helps putting what I say in context. And also the fact that there's strength in numbers, and we just received new numbers from Statistics Canada. So in this slide, there's a cartoon picture of two doctors, and one is asking the other, what do you think they want? And by they, he means the 6 people sitting behind him in chairs. One of them is sitting actually in a wheelchair. They look, some of them have visible disabilities. A person has glasses and a cane. But above their heads, they have these little thinking bubbles. We want to make our own decisions. We want to be asked. We want to be treated with respect. And so to start the conversation with that, I just wanted to put this picture, not necessarily because I'm in it, but it's the picture of the entrance of the St. Michael's Hospital downtown Toronto. I'm standing in front of it. I'm wearing a blazer and a turquoise blazer, a yellow top, gray pants. And behind me, there's a man walking with his walker. There's a couple standing, chatting. And there's also farther down, there's a person sitting in a wheelchair. So this image, I posted because this is where I have had most of my surgeries. Also, I still receive care, and I've been in the emergency room a couple of times within this year. Where I receive care, where my family doctor, the person that I see day to day, their practice is the academic family health team linked to St. Michael's Hospital. And so this is why for me, this space is part of my well-being. At my family health team, I was invited as a patient to be part of the social determinants of health quarterly meeting that all the doctors, nurses, staff, they hold. And every 2 years, this committee, the whole clinics actually, they select a social justice project. And last year, they selected a project that Dr. Lori Green and I presented. It's called Accessibility for All. And the key feature of this project is that it started with a patient, with the other patients of the Patient Family Council. And it has been all along the patients that have been leading in creating the wording of the survey, training the doctors, and meeting with the staff. And this is something that in the healthcare system, we usually don't see that. It's usually the doctors and the clinicians and the administrators doing the decisions, or at least moving things forward. So this is really encouraging that there's space in the healthcare system for people like us, that we can share our experience and they see the value of our knowledge. I think this is the point where I wanted to talk about strength in numbers. Strength in numbers is a phrase that usually you hear in the unions, because the more they are, the harder they can fight. The struggle is divided and everyone can put a little bit at a time. And in the end, they all gain something. Well, I wanted to give a positive twist to the numbers that have been recently released from Statistics Canada. And I'm showing here a chart, just the top, the one line, that shows the percentage of Canadians with a disability ages 15 plus has risen by 5%. So the last report says we are 22% Canadians living with disabilities. Now we're 27% of Canadians living with disability. For some, this is discouraging because we know there's a shortage of physicians, family doctors, and it is harder, this is what the research says, it is harder for people with disabilities to get or maintain a family doctor or a nurse practitioner for that matter. And also the rampant increase of poverty among people with disabilities. So yes, seeing that the statistics keep adding to the numbers can be discouraging, but I'm going to put a little positive twist there, because now that we are more, we actually are 8 million people. These are 8 million voices that if we elevate our voices in the little circle of influence that we have, the people around us not only will know more about disability, accessibility, ableism, but they maybe become allies. They can help us. If you only touch one other person, that's going to be 60 million Canadians doing something fantastic for accessibility and changing the culture. Right now, a person with a disability is either seen as an empty vessel that needs to be pitied, or in the other extreme, the superhero that can fly a plane with their feet. And neither of those things are the day-to-day reality of us, of the majority of us. We're just regular people like everybody else who do move, see, hear in different ways than the typical ways. So it is time for the activity poll number 1. And I would like just to make a quick poll. Check only one. What is the phrase that you use to identify yourself, if you do, in relating to disability inclusion? A, I am a disabled person. B, I'm a person with a disability. Or other. And if you choose other, feel free to put something in the chat and see how what comes up from there. If you're uncomfortable, it's absolutely fine to pass. I'm going to ask my the MC or maybe Michael if they can help us identify if there's something that is coming up on the chats.
Yes, I'm monitoring the chat. So we've had a few people put down other, but no one's indicated in the chat what that it is.
Okay. So
I think I can end the poll now. It looks like everyone who wants to has responded.
That's fantastic. Can you read the poll? Because for some reason I don't see it.
I will share the results, and I will also read it if you'd like.
Sure, please.
So we had so it should be sharing the results, but I'll read it as well. So we had 14% say I am a disabled person, 57% said I am a person with a disability, and then 29% indicated other. And then in the chat, we have a few people saying, I simply say I'm visually impaired. And another person indicate that they say that they have an invisible disability.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for participating. This is really important. It's not just the word that you say, but this word has a meaning. There's an intention behind.
Janet,
yes,
DM has raised her hand. Did you want to contribute, DM?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was having trouble adding to other, which is why I didn't. I wanted to put other, but there was no place to add, so I was going to just say, I say a person living with a disability, with disabilities.
Ooh,
I put PLWD, not
Okay.
PWD.
People living with a disability. I like that. Thank you so much, DM. Thank you for that. There's a lot of variations, and some of them are used. For example, if you read reports or organizations that publish something, they usually go with person person first language, person living with disability, because they follow the legal model, the legislation, the act. Other people like DM, for example, they use I'm a person who lives with an impairment or a chronic illness. There's many variations. In my case, I say I am a disabled person. I am disabled by societal, physical, and attitudinal barriers. And that's what I use that. This is a sort of like a political experience, right? I also say I have lived experience of disablement or lived experience of disability. And this is just because I don't see my impairments or my chronic illnesses as the issue, but rather how I interact with the rest of the model. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. A couple more things that usually are topics of conversation in the people with disabilities sphere, and these are the use of euphemisms. Euphemisms, things that you say when you don't want to say what you want to say. For example, when corporation says we're going to streamline our workforce, that means they're going to fire a lot of people. They just don't want to say it that way. So you may have heard handy-capable or differently abled or even special, like a special education. I put an asterisk there after the word special because actually, at least in Toronto, the education system in Ontario, the education system still uses special education as their formal program and procedures and policies to provide proper accommodations to students. So that word, even though many people don't use it and frown on it, they really, it is one of those words that still has to be used. And the last bit regarding words, I wanted to talk about microaggressions. You know, when people say, "Oh, you're such an inspiration," no, I'm just a person trying to go by my day to day. I have to do it with more steps, but my goal in life is not to be somebody's inspiration. And the late Stella Young, an actor and activist and author, spoke about. She has a TED Talk. It's very enlightening, very educational. And it says, I am not your inspiration. Thank you very much. And I recommend, if you can, get a hold of it. It's on Google. And one that I hear from people who really love me, respect me, they tell me, "Oh, you don't look disabled to me." And it may come from a place of compassion and love, but in fact, they are invisibilizing my experience. They are negating the fact that I do have disabilities, that I do face barriers, that it takes a lot of energy for me to just do regular things that other people do. So it is, if I am identifying as a disabled person, then go with it because I am proud of who I am. And I am telling you, this is who I am. But this conversation will not end here. The debate for sure will continue. And I just wanted to share a couple of concepts. Again, this is not an academic class, but I wanted to share the updated definition of disability. The World Health Organization says disability is part of being human and integral to the human experience. Disability is not the same as a health condition. There's been many versions, but this is the latest version that the World Health Organization is proposing. Again, this comes with a lot of activism and interventions from lived experience, people with living experience of disability, thank you, DM, that have lobbied for this. However, the Ontario Human Rights Code definition is something that not only all the systems in this province and in Canada, in fact, go by, and the medical system also follows that because of how the colonial capitalist system has been set up. The doctors are ruled by the legislation. So the legislation says disability is any degree of physical disability, infirmity, malformation. I'm going to slow down for the ASL interpreters. Or disfigurement that is caused by bodily injury, birth defect, and illness, and the list goes on and on. I just want to contrast when somebody outside my body says, what is disability? And when we say, no, 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 this is disability for me, right? The barriers that I face in my day-to-day, that's the disability. When we talk about disability, we also talk about ableism. Structural ableism, such as this legal definition. I wanted to share this definition. It's a working definition by Talila Lewis. And she says ableism is a system that places value to people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, desirability, and productivity. The definition keeps going on and says these constructed ideas are rooted in eugenics, misogyny, anti-Blackness, colonialism, and capitalism. This could be the whole talk for a day, and I recommend that you learn more about not just one definition of ableism, but many. Again, the internet can be your source, your library, and you can find a lot of very, very good scholars and disability justice activists. The last piece that I wanted to share with you about this is that Lewis says, this form of systemic oppression leads to people and society to determine who is valuable and worthy based on a person's language, appearance, religion, or their ability to reproduce or produce, excel, and behave. You don't have to be disabled to experience ableism. So that's a lot. And I encourage you to take a look at the definitions that exist there. And Michael, maybe we can launch poll number 2. And here, what I'm asking is, again, just choose one. When you interact with a health provider, you have to say, oh, I went to see my provider, or use this phrase, I am a patient, I am a client, I am a person receiving care, I am a consumer. And again, if you don't find anything here, you want to put other and put it on the chat, that would be good. I can tell you that there's some groups that specifically use terminology that they have created, they have researched, they have studied it, and they have come up with a specific way of self-identifying their experience of disablement. I don't know if we have any results, Michael, or maybe any answers.
We do, and it looks like people have stopped answering. So 40% said I'm a patient, 33% said I am a client, 20% said I am a person receiving care, 0% said I am a consumer, probably good, and 7% said I am a patient. Sorry, 7% said other, and in the chat, the comments were I am a patient and I am an elder.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can I don't have chat. I think
Okay.
because I've been made a host, I don't have chat. So I am a citizen.
Okay. Thank you for that. I couldn't see your
Thank you.
name, but
It's
thank you.
DM, but I cannot find the chat. Can somebody help me find the chat at the bottom of this bar?
The only way I can tell you is try Alt-H and see if that brings it up.
But it's absolutely okay if you speak and say something with your own voice. This is very accommodating.
I can't find Alt. Oh, there it is. Alt H. I don't have chat because I'm an. I think it's because I'm a host.
Okay. Yeah.
No, you should have chat, but that's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I have.
Thank you for that to say I'm a citizen. So, as I said before, language matters. There's a lot of people who live in Canada, and for many different reasons, no judgment here, may not be a citizen, may not even hold an OHIP card, right? We saw that during COVID. A lot of the temporary workers were giving special access to the vaccine and clinical services as a COVID prevention mechanism, but the minute the pandemic was gone, it was taken away from them as well. There's landed immigrants, and there's people from Quebec who may not consider themselves Canadians. It's complex. But in the terms of patients, I use the word patient because, as I said, I constantly, at least weekly, I'm doing something with and intersecting with the healthcare system or managing my own healthcare. I have to go for therapies, etc. In the MAD Pride community, they use the word psychiatrized. And there's, again, a lot of research about it. It's an interesting word. It has a history behind it, and it has a goal behind it as well. So words matter, and you can use whatever you desire. I have been educated by a very good friend of mine to use a descriptive phrase, I am a person receiving care. And why was that? That sometimes people look at patients as a problem, a disease, something's wrong with you. The moment you enter the clinic or the office, it's like, oh, what's wrong with you? You know, they see you as your disease, your pathology. And in the case of me, who I'm a patient and I have a disability, they double up that undervalued identity that they have ascribed to me. I feel comfortable saying that I'm a patient, that I'm a patient partners, but I have a dozen different ways, euphemisms to describe myself depending on what space I'm occupying. When I'm in front of the class teaching medical students in the Faculty of Medicine, I tell them I'm an adult education specialist, or I'm a health mentor if I'm teaching interprofessional education. You know, there's who you are. You can say who you are at that moment. So I want to move on a little bit because I want to have time for some conversation a little bit later. And I wanted to say we are the experts. I think I'm not here. This is the third and last poll. And again, only answer if you feel comfortable. And I just wanted to know, what is the most frequent place where you seek care or receive care? Do you go to the hospital because you're so healthy that only once every 10 years, you know, you may have something that bothers you? Or maybe you do go to your doctor's office, or a physio, eye care, massage therapist, naturopath, community health center. We're going to give it a minute and see how that works. And maybe we have some answers.
Yes, the answers are still coming in. I'll share the poll in just a moment.
Sure. So the reason this is here is for you to make you think that when we interact with the healthcare system, it's not just one single door. I have to have monthly blood tests. I don't have to go to the hospital or to my doctor. I have, twice a month I have to go to physiotherapy. Again, it's not the hospital. And so on and so forth. I've been to the dentist 4 times this month. And so there's different doors that we use to access healthcare. And this province has received the final recommendations for the healthcare accessibility standard since April 2022. They have not approved it, and they even water it down to be accessible healthcare in hospitals only. So I'm curious to see how that works.
So the results have come in. So 22% said hospital, 33% said a doctor or nurse's offices, 22% said another type of healthcare provider, 6% said community health center, and then 17% said other. And the comments in the chat were that they did all of the above. And that they saw many doctors' offices, and one person's comment was in-home care was another option that they used.
Thank you for that. You see, there's so many ways where we receive or go to look for care. So, as I mentioned, this new legislation hopefully will pass before January 1st, 2025, is going to hopefully make the healthcare in hospitals accessible. And what about the rest? What about all of these other places where we would receive care, right? So this is another example of systemic ableism, where the government passes legislation that is not really, it doesn't meet our needs.
Janet?
Yes?
So we have DM has raised her hand, and we are at the end of time.
Okay.
So we'll let Elder DM have her comment on this last poll, and then if you could just quickly wrap it up.
Absolutely. Yes. DM, go ahead.
You might be muted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we cannot hear you.
Hey. Well, I think she's gone. Okay, well, yes, we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Sure.
Great.
So I really appreciate everyone's participation, because knowing that you have a little bit of influence when you see your doctor, your nurse, and you can educate them on who you are, what your disability is, how you manage the disease, you're making them look at you as a partner, not just as somebody who comes as an empty vessel. And the most important thing that I wanted to share is that we all can do this work together. I've learned from community, and what I learn, I immediately turn around and teach it to somebody else, whether it is at the University of Toronto for different faculties, nursing, dentistry, etc., first-year medical schools, future doctors. So whatever you go, you can educate others on who you are, what's disability, how cool it is to live the way we do. We are so resourceful. And with that, I just wanted to leave my contact, and I wanted to thank you, the organizers, for the time and the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your time on this lovely Saturday afternoon. And now, for something completely different, I'd like to pass the mic on to John. And John Andro has been doing comedy since 2020. Wow, there's been a lot of things that have been happening since 2020. He's done lots of Zoom shows and some live shows as well. He also has a black belt in karate and likes to study ASL. Well, we've got the ASL going, and I just want to thank our interpreters, and I hope everything's going well for the two of them. And I know that there's at least one person who is taking up your services. So thank you. And John, off to you.
Thank you very much for having me on today. It's a great honor for me to be part of this afternoon. So thank you again. And as we're talking about disabilities and different things today, I use a wheelchair to get around, and I have cerebral palsy. So during the day, I use a wheelchair to get around. I go to work, I use a wheelchair to get around, but also in this process, I've also realized that I'm old. I don't feel old. I don't feel my age. I feel like 25. I don't feel old. But technology, as we are seeing today, technology makes me feel old. And here's why. The first piece was when I started using Zoom in 2020. I came in, got used to Zoom, hooked that all in, and then I was cleaning my monitor. My wife comes in and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to get rid of this little mark, the circle mark on top of my computer." She said, "Dodo, that's your camera." I said, "That's a camera?" She said, "It's a camera." I said, "Okay, that's a camera." So I've gotten used to that. The second piece is a couple weeks ago we had problems with our television box, and of course, most TV is seen by internet services today, and they tap into stuff. So we had to get our internet box fixed. So I called the cable company. He says, "I can help you, but do you have a smartphone?" I said, "No, I don't have a smartphone. I have a dumb phone." He said, "Pardon me?" I said, "A dumb phone." He said, "Can you get the internet on the phone?" I said, "No." He said, "Can you text on the phone?" I said, "Not very well." He said, "Well, what exactly can you do on the phone?" I said, "Call people." He's, and I said, "If I'm lucky, they call me back." And so he said, "Okay." So we got the problem fixed. But also part of this is my age again, and I'm sorry to say this, but my age, my favorite genre of music is 70s, 80s. So I really don't understand today's music. I have an appreciation for it, but I do not understand part of it. Like part of it is there's an artist in Canada, he's Canadian, this guy called The Weekend. I know about him now because uh, because I know about him now because I've learned and I've listened to some of his music. But before, a person says to me, he says, "John, do you like The Weekend?" And I said, yeah, Saturdays and Sundays are always good. He said, no, no, no. And if you get the odd Monday, that's even better. He said, no, no. He said, there's an artist called The Weekend. And I said, okay. So I listened to him and I like his music now. But I also realized that he has a song called I Can't Feel My Face When I'm With You. And to me, it's a nice song, but to me, when I say you can't feel your face, you're either having a stroke or you're almost falling asleep. You got to call 911. And the last piece about this, about the music business, the music part, was my wife was watching the Grammys last year. And I came out of the room, which was a mistake. I came out of the man cave, as I call it. And that was a mistake because I said, oh, that's a really nice lady's voice I hear there. What's her name? She's got a really nice voice. My wife says, she goes by her. I said, who? She said, her. I said, does she not have a name? No, no, that's what she calls herself. I said, oh, her parents didn't give her a name. And she said, well, you go back in your man cave, which is fine. That's where I wanted to go in the first place. So anyway, that is almost my time today. So thank you very, very much for having me on today. Oh, I hope I provided you a little laugh. And if I see you guys again, I promise I will be more up to date on today's music, or try to be anyway. So back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I've given up on today's music. I really have. Yeah, we've got some weird background noise happening. It's okay.
Me too.
Figure it
Thank
out.
you again.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you very much. We will do our best. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our panel, which we called Inspire Me, because they do. They definitely are inspiring in how, how everybody is moving forward and living in this new world. So I'm going to start by just letting each of them introduce themselves in like a minute or less. Just quickly, who are you, and what do you do, or something about you, just something really quick. And I'm going to go, I'll go in the order that the questions are going to go in. Just, we had a last minute change of panel moderators. So she did all the work, and I'm just going to hopefully be able to use it. So we'll start with Keith.
Thank you, Marcia, and good afternoon and welcome to everybody. I just wanted to thank the Alliance for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Keith Rashid. I'm the founder and director of the Accessible Travel Club. It's a community-based organization that I formed because of my love of traveling the world in spite of my disability. I wanted to inspire and motivate others in the belief that they could see the world just like any of us and enjoy going on vacation, learning about new cultures and societies, getting out and living a quality of life that each and everyone deserves. So that's who I am in a brief bio, and I look forward to participating in today's panel discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Keith. And we'll go to Christina next.
Hi, I'm Christina, and I am a working professional, and I have had I've had a brain injury when I was 17 years old, and I would love to share my experiences going through the world today.
Great, thank you. Amina. do
Hi
you?
everyone,
There
my
you
name
go.
is Amira. My program to say here, and I'm an inspiring social worker.
Great. Okay, and Bob.
Yes, so thank you, Marcia. My name is Bob. I'm a 65-year-old male. I travel our city in Toronto mainly by public transit using a cane, and I'm also a cyclist. I experienced a brain injury in 2011. I, until recently, had to navigate the ugly waters of Ontario disability. I'm a retired community outreach worker. I'm with the Brain Injury Society of Toronto Advocacy and Advisory Committee and West Park Hospital Patient Family Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move forward and see how we go with these questions. So we're going to start with Keith, but the way it's going to work is that I'm going to ask each person a question, but then there's going to be time for follow-up. So if anybody has, and the other panelists have something they want to say. So Keith, in your experience, has the pandemic introduced any new innovations and or barriers to accessible travel?
Yeah, wonderful question. Yeah, expanding on the introduction that I just shared with everyone, my experience in travel and tourism spans well before the pandemic, dealing with mainstream travel and tourism opportunities, working in providing access for the masses. And it's where I came across the opportunity and the realization that there was an underserviced group of persons living, with a disability or challenges in accessing programs and services within the tourism sector. That's, as I said, what led to the founding and the formulation of a community-based group called the Accessible Travel Club. Specifically to the question, um, we like to think of our society as being accessible. We like to think that we have, governments that help us with legislation here in Ontario with the AODA and in the United States with the ADA. And it's interesting that, since the pandemic, there's been a new acronym that's being thrown around quite frequently, and that is, that organizations and businesses are endeavoring to be EDI. And by EDI, we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And, businesses are promoting that, giving them sort of a pat on their back to say that this is what they are able to offer. And I find that interesting, if not ironic, because disability and accessibility has been around a long time, well before the pandemic. And when I speak to businesses in the accessible travel space, that being airlines and hoteliers or cruise lines or even just general venues, whether it be, theater or sporting or recreational opportunities, I find it intriguing that many of them say that they do accommodate people with disabilities. But when you continue the dialogue and you ask them the question, what does that mean? And, it becomes an interesting conversation around why they don't have enough spaces, shall we say, to accommodate or experiences. And most of them cite demand and capacity. Now let's sort of break this down a bit here. If you have ever tried to access a hotel room to understand the level of accessibility in their accommodation, or how many rooms are offered, etc., on or how many cabins are offered on a cruise ship, I encourage you to make a few phone calls and ask those questions, because you'll find that the percentage is very, very low. And unfortunately, it seems that they're missing the mark on accessing a huge population. As our keynote speaker addressed earlier, that demographic is just increasing year over year. We used to say, 1 in 5 persons were living with a disability, whether it be visible or invisible. And today we heard that's, probably closer to 1 in 4. But I'm sure that if you were to ask some of these vendors and suppliers in the travel and tourism and business sector, they are nowhere near providing a correlation to the societal representation of persons living with disability. And it's interesting when you speak to the leadership of these multinational organizations, and they cite that there's just no demand, and therefore they don't have the capacity. They say if more people were coming to our venues or to our businesses, it would allow us to upgrade. And I say to them, the old adage, have you heard it? If you build, they will come. That perhaps that's the way to look at it. I preface this discussion around believing that I'm an optimist, that the glass is half full and not empty. But it's interesting when I speak to, as I said, and these are well-educated presidents, CEOs, vice presidents, who use that analogy on persons like myself that are trying to motivate and educate and advocate for equality, for that same EDI that they aspire and congratulate themselves on achieving. Just ask yourself, in today's world, we hear that there's a labor market shortage, and every job posting I see, you will see, we are promoting EDI. But I'd like to turn that around and say, when are you going to promote accessibility to the same level?
I'm going to stop you there.
So Keith, we have actually a comment from the chat about what about the travel horror stories that you all hear about, losing wheelchairs, not allowing wheelchairs on board with the airlines. Like, how do they respond to that? Like, how is that still happening? Is essentially the question.
Yeah. And we'll leave that for a second, and we'll see what everybody else thinks. So, because we don't know why is that still happening. As Keith says, it shouldn't be. But what does everybody else on our panel think? How have you found navigating either new or familiar environments since the pandemic? Has anything changed? And whoever wants to start.
Well, it's the beginning here, and I was just thinking at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a lot of doctor's appointments, and just the logistics of having to put on a mask was difficult. And usually I would ask someone for help, but because you don't want to be close to anybody, then I was like, oh, I have to figure out and do myself.
Amina, it's the interpreter. I lost you for a minute. The tech, I couldn't hear the last thing you said after about not asking for help to put on a mask.
I was saying that I had to find new ways to help myself.
So you had to become.
Yes.
Okay, Christina or Bob, travel since the pandemic.
It's Christina here. What I found during the pandemic and traveling is that, when everyone is wearing a mask as someone who tends to read people's lips when they're talking, it was definitely harder to kind of understand people when they're talking, just because like with my ability to kind of interpret what they're saying, it was harder because I can't necessarily see their lips when they're talking. So I can't see emotions. I can't see how how they're, how they're like talking to me. And that was very difficult for me.
Okay, and Bob, anything to add to the conversation on this?
Yes, as far as the city of Toronto, I think we're moving forward. We're moving forward, but slowly, especially navigating public transportation. Now, fortunately, the city of Toronto, through their transportation accessibility committee, are asking some of us with lived experience to join and do site surveys. The last survey that I was a little bit part of, we had individuals with motorized chairs, manual chairs, roll-aiders, canes, non-sighted with guide dogs, and non-sighted with canes. And we go and we look at these intersections and review them all and point out to their engineers and their staffers of what we noticed that they're not noticing. We were way far behind, but I see them moving forward, maybe not forward enough or quickly enough, but change is happening. It's just not happening quick enough to navigate our city, especially for the unsighted, is difficult, and actually, from what I've been told, quite frightening.
Okay. Sure, Elder DM. Since that was the last person to comment on that one question, we can take your question in the middle here. Sure. Go ahead. You are still muted, I do believe. Yeah, your hand is up, but you're muted.
I can't unmute myself.
Yes, you can. You just did.
Now I can, yeah. I just wanted to say, I'm really disappointed in the city of Toronto. In 1989, I did a huge consultation with them. And I said, it was entitled Enough is Enough, the Women's Directorate. It was for equal opportunity, and it was accessibility at the city of Toronto. And there's things that I recommended in 1989 that they still haven't done. So slow is being kind. It really is. They don't get it. There's an arrogance in the ableist body. I just get really angry, and I control my anger, and I just basically say, we're just all one accident away from being people with disabilities. And if you don't get that, your world is going to be as painful as mine.
Yeah. Now I see we've got some more hands coming up, and I'd like to suggest, if you could, hold your questions until the end of the panel, just so that we can get to as many people as we can. That would be great. Thank you. Okay. So we're off to the next question. This should bring some interesting comments. So this goes to Christina for the first round. How has the adoption of remote or hybrid work settings affected your professional life?
So for me, I think it has affected me kind of in a positive and a negative way. When I was 17 years old, I did have a brain injury, which resulted to me being partially blind and with an invisible disability that no one necessarily can see. Sorry. So I graduated from college in 2017, and then I graduated from university in 2019. When I graduated from university, I had a difficulty. I had a difficult time acquiring a permanent job. So I was working full time for contracts at banks while I was looking for a permanent job. And then during the pandemic in 2020, I had actually started a permanent job, and I was fully remote. What I found with working remote is I was able to kind of self-accommodate in a way. As someone with an invisible disability, it's very hard to open the conversation of what accommodations do I need, because people don't see my disability, and so they try to guess, they try to assume what my disability is. By working from home, I'm able to self-accommodate. So for example, I'm blind on my right side. So what I do is all my notebooks, all my pens and everything else, it's all on my left side. My computer is on my left side. I'm able to accommodate for myself. And for example, one more example is I have memory issues. And so how I accommodate for that is I actually have, I write everything down. I'm able to self-accommodate in a way that I don't think, for some people, they don't think that writing everything down is necessary, but for me, to accommodate myself in that regard is how I can fully participate as a person living with a disability.
Okay, great. And okay, for the other three, in your experience, what's been the main benefit or downside to more widespread use of web conferencing? Oh yeah, or other remote working tools. Don't we just love Zoom? Actually, I love Zoom, so I shouldn't say that. So, upside, downside. Anyone want to chime in?
Well, it's Mina here again. I was just thinking of when I do have a Zoom meeting, I need someone to help me get my laptop. So if I don't have a person to help me set up my laptop, then I'm kind of stuck. I can't really get on it myself, and also if there's a passcode to the meeting, it takes me time. So I think a big help is just people being patient. Like,
Yeah, we all have to be patient, that's for sure.
So, Marcia, if I can add some comments here.
Sure.
So, as a club that motivated people to get out, re-engage into the community travel, obviously, the pandemic restricted most of those activities. So, one of the benefits was the fact that it, through web conferencing, it allowed us to reach members, across the country, if not across the world, who could still participate in social interaction online. Those that previously were sort of isolated or in rural areas who had some transportation or mobility challenges were now able to participate in weekly virtualing travel talks instead of travel actual opportunities. But at the same time, we heard a lot of stories about the downside, which was the fact that many individuals experienced challenges because they needed support persons, for example, in person to come in and, as Amina pointed out, log in to Zoom to participate, whether it was a healthcare or a personal care professional that all of a sudden was limited in their ability to service the needs of a person that required attendant care. So just wanting to add that dynamic in terms of my perspective.
It always helps if you unmute yourself when you're muting yourself. All right, so Bob or who have I missed? No, just Bob.
Hi. I think we learned a lot.
What do you think?
I believe we learned a lot through COVID. What would we do if we didn't have Zoom? For those of us and our community members with the various types of mobility restrictions, we are able to talk with each other and be able to communicate. Many of individuals that have a history of brain injury, isolation is a major part of isolation is a major part of that has to be dealt with from day to day. And Zoom opened up the door to communicate, not just our neighbors, but our nearby towns, but to different countries. And we're able to do it for free. And for those of us that were taking many programs during COVID, that were attending physiotherapy and therapy programs, so on, all that stopped. And there was such a sense of abandonment that it's, well, we're not in control. We don't know how to navigate this. We don't know how to move forward, but we're going to try to figure out, we'll get back to you. Many didn't. Many haven't to this particular day. But we are able to we were able to communicate with the groups got up and running through Zoom. COVID also taught us a lot about the insecurities we have about housing, nutrition, and mental health. We keep knocking on the doors of municipal politicians and provincial politicians and members of parliament. Through Zoom, we are able to have face-to-face meetings with them, if those that were able to allow us that. I think we learned a lot, and COVID really brought to light is that individuals that are going to food banks or relying on food banks, we've got to really look at why are people at our community members at food banks. Politicians spend a month at a food bank, not just at Photoshop.
No, and we'll get to that in a minute. We have one person, Khadija. Can your question, concern wait until the end of the panel? We're about halfway through.
As you wish, because I was just going to mention about the COVID impact.
Yeah, well,
so just 2 sentences. The positive is
Okay.
Zoom, exactly like Bob said, excellent, because I was actually able to access some of my not physiotherapy, but those exercise sessions that online. So those were amazing, and information and ASL and all that. And also, I think the positive things was also regarding the mask for people who needed to lip read. Whoever brought that up, the transparent mask, I thought that was amazing. But on the negative side, I could not even access, after the first vaccine, getting to do a COVID test was a problem, because even though outside Toronto Western Hospital, there's this banner saying people with accessibility needs can show up and they will be accommodated. It's right outside the door. But when I got there, they were being very rude. They said, we don't care what your needs are. And I did not have internet to book anything. So I walked all the way with my visual issues. And and no, there was no accommodation whatsoever. And on the contrary, they were just being extremely demeaning and patronizing. And I felt, and there was nowhere to complain. So I, even with patient relations, and they said, oh, you can call whenever. So I kept getting different numbers, and nobody would actually take it seriously. So I felt during COVID, Marcia, just 10 more seconds, we were just dumped because I have visual needs issues. And I don't think the priority, we were like the lowest on the ladder. So like even with food, I couldn't access grocery, and faith communities, faith-based groups helped me out. So that was very, I don't know, I just felt very, non-visible at that time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And geez, I don't mean to cut people off, but we want to get through the questions to get to the questions. So, okay. So we're going on to the next question, and Amina gets it first. What's the main way your educational experience has changed since the pandemic? Have any of the lecture or teaching styles adopted during that time brought anything new to the table for disabled students?
So I started my second program in 2020. So I had an interesting journey. I'm in my fourth year of university now. So I wanted to break this up into three main sections so that people could understand what I went through. In the beginning of 2020, I had difficulty setting up Zooms and stuff. So although it was good that everybody could go on Zoom and we were equal that way, I didn't always have the strongest Wi-Fi. So sometimes I would get kicked out of meetings, and then if I had peer support, and we have to turn up my cameras. Some professors didn't understand why my camera was off. And then during 2021 to 2022, we started going back to campus. It became mandatory to come back to campus. And because of my physical needs, I wanted to keep my staff safe, and I wanted to stay home. But I had to fight a lot to get that support because everybody was kind of thinking, it's over. What's the big deal? But then I was struggling to explain that even though it's over for some people, it wasn't.
So even though it was over for everybody else, it wasn't over for you. Is that it? Because we sort of lost the end of that sentence.
Yes, that's kind of funny that we keep losing internet because that was one of my main problems. That I would not be able to attend class because of Wi-Fi, or I was being asked to go in person, but I couldn't do it because of my supportive housing requirements.
Okay. All right. So.
Did you get all of that?
I think so. Interpreters, are you okay?
Interpreters got all of it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
The second question was about how my professors accommodated me, and it was funny because even though I had an accommodation, I found that my accommodations were being ignored because professors would say, you're at home, so you can just do the work like everybody else. But just because I was home, the accommodations or not needed.
Yeah, that's yeah. All right. Well, let's see what the rest of the group wants to weigh in here. So, in your opinion, what are the most pressing barriers facing disabled students in the classroom today? If we even have a classroom, we're back to that, aren't we? So, whoever, if anyone wants to chime in, Christina, maybe.
Yeah. So I graduated a year before the pandemic, so I wasn't really in the classroom during the pandemic. But I was just thinking about, for example, when your professor is sick and they have, they like recorded their lecture for the class to watch and all that. I found that pretty helpful because you were able to kind of set your own timeline on, like you can fast forward and then you can pause, or you can zoom, you can speed up the recording so that you can actually get the main the main talking points of the class, rather than trying to get to how the class is going and all that stuff. And I really found that very helpful when I was in school. But I would think that, I think that was the main positive thing that the pandemic has brought to the classroom.
Okay, and no barriers come to mind.
No.
No. Okay. Great. All right. Well, I think in the end, we'll move on to the second last question of our panel. This one is to Bob. Disabled Canadians face societal barriers in areas as diverse as housing, employment, poverty, transportation, daily living, and more. The pandemic made some of these barriers worse and led to progress in tackling others. For you personally, which aspect of life changed the most, either for better or for worse?
Well, where could I start? Transportation is a big one, because many of us that received transportation, public transportation that met a certain criteria, we received in those days before COVID, we called it a Metro Pass. So we are able to attend all our medical appointments, all our community events, be able to travel through the city freely and be out and get some exercise and socialize. When COVID came up in the first year in June, we lost all our public transportation funding. So we didn't have the money. Many of us didn't have the money to just to take the bus. Just to take the bus to go to a food bank. We didn't have the money because we lost all our funding. And yes, we had access to the Fair Pass program, but it still was money that was taken out of nutrition. Can I get you quickly to repeat the question? I lost track there from what that happens.
Sure, not a problem. Basically the question is, for you personally, which aspect of life changed the most, either for better or for worse, since the pandemic? So housing, poverty, daily living, all of that. Which went better, which went worse?
Well, it went terribly more difficult, especially for housing, for those of us that have experienced the Ontario Disability System. Even though your name is on the Toronto housing list, you're going to be waiting a long, long time. Many of us, for me personally, 86.4% of my disability income went towards housing, towards rent, and my rent is cheap. I had to work 2 part-time jobs just to get paid for one because of clawback in those days, and one job I should have never been doing. I think that and to get a job during COVID and then have somebody accommodate your disability situation was real difficult. But we learn we learn a lot about it. I think our voices are now are being heard more. Is not just about listening to what those of us with lived experience have to say, but to hear what we are saying, because we are the experts, and we need to get our three levels of government, politicians, municipal, provincial, federal, to not pretend to listen to what we're saying, but to hear what we are saying.
That is so true. Okay. So I'm going to throw it out to the rest of my panel. Which pandemic era shift affected you the most? So what change made the most effect on you personally? And whoever wants to start.
So, Marcia, as I listened to Mina, Bob articulate their challenges, I also recall, around accessibility in the education system, as well as the transportation that they spoke about. That earlier, I referred to EDI and accommodation becoming the new lingo and the new acronyms being thrown around by organizations and patting themselves on the back. But I found it interesting that after the pandemic, you would think that we had learned more, especially within, the universities and the colleges and the education systems, about supporting students, young adults with disabilities who have varying different learning styles and capacities. And, someone had alluded to earlier in today's conference about energy levels that persons with chronic conditions also face. And I found it interesting that after learning about all these virtual technology tools like Zoom and Teams and being able to adapt to them very quickly and record lectures, etc., interviews, we've now resorted back to forcing all of these students and individuals back into the school or work environment and not appreciating that, again, different learning styles and transportation barriers are all responsibilities of organizations and societies to accommodate and give everybody a choice. So mandating people back into classrooms or else they're not going to be able to participate makes me scratch my head and wonder whether we are ever going to meet the standards and the legislation. I laugh at the fact that 2025, we have a mandate of achieving our AODA legislation. Whoever believes in that, I'd love to hear the argument. So that's my take.
Okay. Does anyone else want to weigh in before we go to our final question?
Yes, I'd like to make a quick comment. During COVID, many of us didn't have access to proper nutrition. Our most vulnerable community members didn't have access to proper nutrition, including our retired or elderly community. And if we don't have access to proper nutrition, where we're not forced to buy what we call belly fillers, pastas, potatoes and rice, processed food, if we don't have access to proper nutrition, nothing else will work. Our bodies won't work, our minds won't work. We need access to proper nutrition for those most vulnerable in our communities, for the most in need. Hopefully we've learned from this experience during COVID.
I hope so. Okay. So, I want one last bit from each of you, please. What positive message can you give us to help us all move forward and live in our new world? And please feel free to either add to what you've already said or something brand new, but what positive message from each of you? So, Keith.
Yeah, so our membership and our volunteers have this saying that if society understood that where there's a will, there's a way. That's the eternal optimism amongst our membership, the belief that there is truly a light at the end of the tunnel, and that as slow as it may be, we live in a world of what we like to call, at least in the travel and tourism world, a world of possibility. And that's what we need to focus on, is how do we inspire everyone, look forward, to accommodate and to address individual needs around their abilities and make this a more adaptable, welcoming world.
Okay. Christina.
I would just like to say, the pandemic definitely taught us lessons in its own thing, but to be more understanding of people's needs and what people need to be accommodated. Yeah, that's my takeaway from this.
Okay, Amina.
I just want to take a moment to remind everyone, especially employers, that accessibility helps everyone. Accessibility does not exclude anyone. It can help everyone in future. So I just encourage all of us to work as a community to advocate for accessibility.
That's right. Everything that helps us helps everybody. You're so right. Okay. And Bob, you have the last word.
Yes, I think on a extreme positive note, I mean, Zoom has taught us so much, but it's allowed us to connect from organizations to find out about each other and talk to all different parts of the world. I get to communicate with the University of Hong Kong or University of Faculty of Medicine in Sydney, Australia. But we also have community centers or community organizations that could be 2 blocks away from us that don't even know they're there. All these different silos or organizations now have had the opportunity to connect. And when we connect and share information, it helps everybody. Thank you.
Oh, that's a terrific way to end this panel and to move into our Q&A. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the raised hands thing. If anybody wants to put their question in the chat, Michael will go back and forth. But Peggy, you're first. So just a sec. Your raised hand is raising. Sometimes screen readers give me too much information. So we'll start with Peggy, and then we'll go to Michael if there's something in the chat, and then we'll go to the next person whose hand is up. So we'll try and be equal opportunity here. And interpreters are available if there is someone who wants to say something, and maybe the best idea would be if the interpreter raises their hand, maybe, just so that I'm aware that they're going to be speaking for someone. But Peggy's first. Peggy, go for it. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so sorry. I have to apologize. I do have an upper body muscular issue, so if I caused issues with raising and lowering my hand,
No.
I apologize. So mainly, I have comments. So I'm going to go back to transportation. I live in the region of Halton. We don't have we have 4 municipalities whose transportations don't interconnect transportation systems. So that's a problem. I don't know if that will be resolved. But as far as Metrolinx, we got quite a few new stations in the last decade here. I've been a long time transportation advocate, by the way. in our say Burlington, for example, and where I live. And what we have found is accessibility wise, there's elevators, but they're on the other side of where everybody needs to access them. So, we actually brought this up to Metrolinx in a local community municipal meeting, and of course everything's done now, it's built, but it was obvious that there was no consultation with persons with lived experience. Then I'm also immune compromised. I'm going to go into the next thing. I'm a person who lives with a rare disease. I'm immune compromised. So COVID hasn't gone away from me. And I am low income. I am on the CPPD ODSP system for about another 2 years. And then I get off of that and go into the next, I think, broken income system, but we shall see. And what I have found is that I don't have any access to food. I have spent a long time advocating to get food brought to me. And because I have a rare disease that involves multiple, I'm a celiac, I have multiple food allergies, but I can't get food brought to me and I can't access outside. I can't go outside. I also live in a very physically inaccessible unit with multiple stairs in and out of my unit and inside my unit. And but this was the only housing that accommodated my rare disease, in which I have to have my own air circulation because anaphylaxis attacks ensue with environmental scents and smells. So for myself as an immune compromised person, and I suspect for many people in my community and in other communities, there are many me's who are unfortunately food precarious, not getting, now the doctors, don't want to do phone because the ministry and the government of Ontario is saying you have to see your patients in person. Well, during the pandemic, my family doctor moved out of Oakville into Toronto. And because I'm such a complex patient, I cannot just change doctors, and many doctors don't want to take on a patient like me. So that's just not going to happen.
Did you have a question? I'm sorry. I just wanted
yeah,
to know,
I do have some questions because
we've got other
I'm
people
giving some,
just to let you know.
Sure. I'm just giving some statements, like comments, because I want to know if some of the things I'm talking about, if any of the panelists or others have found ways to overcome these things, like trying to get some shoveling done or different things, like so that my PSW can keep coming in. There's for myself, the positive has been Zoom and being able to access the world. What's happening in my experience, like with my volunteer work and things like that, everybody wants to meet in person again. Getting hybrid is problematic, because it's a bother to people. And so the isolation is creeping back in, whereas at the beginning of the pandemic, it was fantastic because I thought now the whole world understands my shoes that I live in every day. But I don't know how others are finding this, and especially around the isolation with autoimmune persons, because I don't think anybody on this panel, other than, pardon me, sorry, I shouldn't say that, are experiencing some of those issues, although I wouldn't qualify for the intensive support, in-home intensive support. I get some support, but not intensive.
Okay, does anyone on the panel want to comment? Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
And Marcia, I know from the chat that Sybil S, who's raised her hand, also wanted to make a comment on what Peggy was saying.
Okay, we'll throw it to the panel, and then we'll go to Sibel. And I know Janet, you lowered your hand, and I was going to ask you if we could go to Sibel after Peggy. But let's just see if anybody on the panel wants to comment on anything that Peggy has said.
I'd like to make a quick comment, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could, I'm just going to throw it out there, and I'll be very quick. I would give your city councilor a call and ask them if they're familiar with any organizations in your area that would be able to help you. City councilors, the best through their staffers, that might know of resources that are available that maybe you're just not familiar with.
It's a great idea. Okay, and I'm going to move on to Sibel. And you're muted.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Hi, sorry I'm off camera today. I actually just want to pick up on the part about housing and autoimmune disorders and anaphylaxis and rare disorders, because I live with that too. The last 6 months of my life have been extraordinarily difficult and completely displacing. I had to leave home because of the wildfire smoke. And everything I do from morning to night is to prepare for next year's smoke season. The government has basically abandoned those with conditions that are impacted by the wildfire smoke, as the public health official in Toronto has said. They consider this a long-term issue in terms of risk, not short-term for those of us who are vulnerable. And so I don't actually have this housing that is safe. And I have tried to get this housing that is safe. I have approached multiple agencies, all of these government people that, Bob, you just referenced. I have gone through all of that and gotten nowhere. In fact, I got so desperate that I sent one of these community workers the MAID form and thought that would elicit a response of, wow, it must be really impacting you now. But instead, the same person who said they couldn't help me with housing because it wasn't within their scope said that they would be willing to help me figure out the MAID form. And so, it's surreal when it starts happening to you yourself. It's really surreal. You can read about it. You can read about these stories in the paper. You can read about the kid who died of an asthma attack in 100 Mile House, or, about the people who have played that MAID card and lost. They were taken up on it and they actually went through with it for environmental health reasons. And then you can experience it directly. And it has been such a tremendous wake-up call that it doesn't actually matter how well you self-advocate. We don't have the numbers. And so the othering, the way that every single specialist, as in unison, it's like I could put them in a montage together, has screwed up their face when they said this is atypical. Like, ew, this is atypical. As if it was the dirtiest word. So I would like to reach out just to everybody here and say, like, I'll put my email in the chat if there are other folks who want to engage with the issue around wildfire smoke and folks who have conditions that make us vulnerable to wildfire smoke, knowing that the next 10 years are going to be probably pretty brutal. So, I know this includes folks with a whole assortment of respiratory conditions, as well as immune conditions, mast cell diseases, environmental sensitivity, that I would really like to be in touch, because I think, unfortunately, what we need is numbers. Anyway, thank you very much. I know that Peggy talked about a lot of things. I just wanted to reference that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I've got no one interested in asking the panel a question. Do we have anyone that
Marcia, there was a question from
the
the
question in the chat. I said we were going to go to the chat, and what did I do? I didn't go. And then Janet wanted to say something as well. So do the chat, since we should have done that, and then Janet, and that'll probably.
So this is one of the questions from the chat. And I'll just read a chunk of it because it's well written. And it's from David Myers, who said, I agree with many of the comments on the impact of virtual meetings, platforms like Zoom, Google Meet, etc. Zoom's reduced disability poverty for many disabled folks that were previously denied access to virtual work in various forms, but forcibly requiring people to return to in-person work in our workforce is ableist and a form of disability injustice. I think we need to challenge and combat that. What are the ways our community can work together to do that better? And that's the question to the panelists.
Oh, panelists, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, so I'd just like to add to my previous comment that, you know, the messaging that needs to go out to leaders of businesses and organizations and government is that accessibility matters, and that they really need to understand, you know, the rhetoric language that they use about the world being accommodating. It's, as many have articulated today, there's strength in numbers. We all have a duty to speak up and to challenge the norm. We need to call out through, you know, examples of poor accommodation requests. You know, as part of the accessible travel, someone referenced earlier the poor customer service examples that receive national recognition by the various airlines here in Canada, you know, not and requiring them to step up. Now we'll see, you know, whether they actually do anything about it. But I think we each have a responsibility to educate, to advocate, and to call out the needs for accommodation, whether it be transportation, whether it be education, etc. So, you know, there is strength in numbers, but if we sit quietly on our hands, we're not going to meet any of these standards, and no one's going to pay attention.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything they want to say from the panel? And then we'll go to Janet, and then we'll close off this section.
Yeah, Christina here speaking. I think that, you know, having been able to work fully remote during the pandemic has definitely helped me. I don't particularly agree that, you know, companies should be able to like force everyone to go into office. So for example, with my workplace, we are not required to go into the office, and that really helps me a lot. I'm able to, you know, as I said during the panel, I'm able to self-accommodate for myself. I don't need to set up my workplace or my workplace kind of setting all the time that I like when I come into the office. I'm able to just do it in my own way. And yeah, I think that it definitely helped me a lot during the pandemic. And moving forward, I think that, you know, I think that it's really helping me just work in my own way.
Okay. All right, I've got 2 participants who have raised hands now. I've got, okay, so I all right, so I have, we have Elder Janet. So, well, we have 3 minutes. You get a minute and a half each to do with what you will.
Sure.
Janet,
My question is quick, and maybe
okay.
to Amina. We've have a lot of conversations about transitions into COVID, out of COVID, a lot of things put in place, a lot of things taken back. Has any conversations, or maybe Christine as well, as a young person going through school and looking for a job, have you received any support from your educational institution about how to handle transition from being in school to a job seeker?
Okay, Amina or
From
Christina?
my experience, a lot of people have struggled to find ways to support me because they want to help me get a job, but they don't know how to get me into the interviews. Because a lot of people, when I go for interviews, they can see that I have a speech impairment and I have a disability, and I've been told that I'm a quote unquote liability because I won't be able to meet their over the way. In my experience, they've had me and use my resources.
Okay, we're losing you.
Can you hear me out?
Sort of.
Yes?
Okay, now, yes.
Yeah. I was saying, in my experience, I had to self-advocate to get volunteer positions, but as far as an actual job goes, it's difficult because I'm not on DSP. So I have to meet the requirements of ODSP while trying to events and things. My career is very difficult to get over there.
Most of it, I think.
Thank you for that.
Okay, and Elder DM, you have the last word on this, on the panel section of our day today. And you're muted.
I
Yay.
just wrote this way that the conversation is framed, being at home or not at home, and to make life make it more possible. I think about the
Sorry, DM, it's the interpreter. You're cutting out. There's a sound issue. I'm not sure. I can't hear it.
Okay, just a second. Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's better.
Better.
Can anybody hear me if they can hear me now?
It's the interpreter. It's better, but there's a static noise
verbally?
that's difficult and distracting. It's from, I don't know where it's coming from though.
I'm just going to gather that you can't hear me.
We can, but we can't.
I can
Yeah.
hear internals.
You've got a clicking thing happening.
Can you hear me now? Can somebody hear me verbally?
We're getting a popcorn noise on the background.
Sorry?
We're getting a popcorn noise on the background, on your background.
Okay, so I just thinking about, you make a door, that whole thing about it helps everybody. Well, why I think and work with people that have imaginations that we frame the question of working at home or not at home. Why don't we have I don't like the situation of working, but I'm convenient to take transit or anything like this. I would be willing to do it half and half, and I'd love a 4-day week with minimum $25 an hour. So I just have to get out of the binary. We have to get rid of this binary thing of course, it's Western. All I have to say is that what's wrong with the combination?
Yeah, we can't hear you now. It's getting worse instead of better. Okay, and I'm going to have to stop it there because I'd like to try and keep reasonably on time. We have one more chance for Q&A at the end of our guest speakers talk, but I want to first of all thank our sponsors who are making this possible. They are covering the costs that we have for events like this, which is the ASL and the CART. And we thank our interpreters who have been doing yeoman's jobs without breaks, and I hope they've been able to grab breaks when they can. They're going to get one in a minute. So I just want to thank our sponsors on behalf of AEBC, the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians. We have Baker McKenzie and the Canadian Council of the Blind, the Toronto Visionaries. They are both our gold sponsors this year, and the Trailblazers Tandem Cycling Club is a silver sponsor. And I'm right now going to try and share my own screen and share my sound and give us a little musical interlude from Natalia Jopo, whose technical issues required that he actually record his piece. We were hoping that he would play live, but you know, things happen. So we had to do the next best thing. So we're gonna just try and share my screen. Okay. Okay, I just need to know whether everybody can hear my screen reader, just so that I know that you'll hear the sound. So did everybody hear babble right then and there?
Yes, we did.
Okay. You don't need to interpret what that just said. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and play the piece that we have. And of course it's gone away. Okay, so we're going to try this, and as soon as it starts, I will kill my screen reader, and hopefully that will mean that you can hear the piano. And I've got someone who's unmuted. So whoever is unmuted, could they mute themselves, please? No, I'm... Sorry, and now my computer has decided that it's going to stop talking to me at all, which is not helpful. Not at all. Michael, if you can... okay, we might be somewhere. I was just going to say, if you can tell me where we are. We are in Media Player, that's where we want to be, and maybe I can get this working.
Right now you're in a you're in Outlook.
Well, okay, I want to be in Media Player.
Now you're in the Media Player, and so I think you just need to press play, and maybe that will make it work.
Maybe, if I could tell where play was. Because Control P is not working. This is always the frustration. Can you see where my cursor is? Okay, hang on, I've got sound now. Just a minute. or I did for 2 seconds.
So the program is loading. It looks like it's not letting you press play yet.
Okay. Apologies, everyone. This is our technical thing. Okay, so
So I think
I should be able to hit play if I can. What is that notification?
so,
Let's
yeah,
see.
you're getting a notification that you might not have the right driver.
Oh yeah.
So
Well,
I don't think you're gonna be
now.
able to. I don't think you're gonna be able to play this.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I just take it back.
Okay. I hope everybody enjoyed that. And I'm just going to get back and stop my screen share. Okay. All right. Okay. Are we still? Did everybody get that? Did that come through? Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and I think
Okay,
it came through just fine.
Okay, so I have a little situational problem here, meaning that someone is about to come to my door. So I'm going to try and quickly introduce Maria so that then I can mute myself. So we'll see how this goes. So our guest speaker is Maria Bangash, and she has a half hour to play with. Maria is an avid advocate for the full inclusion of persons with disabilities. And if two pieces of paper get stuck together, that doesn't help. And the protection of human rights. Maria is the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Smile Canada Support Services, a Canadian charity supporting racialized children and youth with disabilities and their families. She presents across Canada at universities, community events, public and private schools, and at disability and health conferences. Through her education and advocacy efforts, Maria addresses the health disparities faced by racialized communities and persons with disabilities, and the need for physical and social accessibility. Amongst her many accomplishments, Maria was featured on the CBC show You Can't Ask That, a show in which disability and stigma was discussed. Through her lived experience, professional expertise, and social media advocacy, Maria has had a significant impact creating safer spaces in the healthcare and social service sector. And I turn it over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much. I guess they say, the best for last. So here I am. And thank you so much to the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians for inviting me for today's event. Before I start, I just wanted to give a self-identification. For myself, I am a South Asian woman. I have blonde and brown hair. My background is with blue light and a white ring light. I am sitting in a chair, and behind my chair is a traditional Palestinian kufaya. So my name is Maria, and my disability has impacted all parts of my life. To be included and have spaces accessible has been instrumental in every aspect of my upbringing. I work at Smile Canada Support Services as the Education and Outreach Coordinator. It's my 3-year work anniversary now. Smile is a non-for-profit organization that supports racialized children and youth with disabilities and their families. Currently, I'm proud to say we support over 750 families across the GTA. And in my 3 years now that I've spent at Smile, I've come to learn the importance of providing culturally relevant and responsive services to the community and just how critical it is to the families that we support. Growing up with my disability, I had many intersections in front of me that I struggled to acknowledge and also understand. No one helped me focus on them, so I had to learn them on my own. I am Muslim, I am a woman, I have a disability, I am a daughter of immigrants, I'm a student, and I could go on. All these intersections impacted me severely, whether it was in the healthcare sector, experiencing discrimination and being racially profiled, or in the education sector. The assumption that I don't know English because I come from a Muslim and immigrant background. But I was born in Canada. Whether it was my parents not knowing how to fill out a 50-page application to get access to this funding and that funding. They're not from here. They didn't know what therapy programs were available to me. And a lot of the times when it came time for programming, I was excluded from them because of my cultural background. And I felt defeated. And this notion of everyone belongs, I don't think I was part of that everyone. I never got the same opportunity as my friends. They went swimming, they went to summer camp, they went to physio, not me. My experiences are not unique, and the 750 families we support at Smile shared this sentiment with me. And that's heartbreaking. That's one too many families. It is so important for us to address our intersectionalities, but this doesn't mean that we're just talking about how many identities we have. I listed my identities to you earlier, but we're not counting, and most certainly we are not competing. I identify as certain things, and you identify as others. Intersectionality is about how structures make certain identities the consequences of the vehicle for vulnerability. In some places, I can't be Muslim. I will face Islamophobia. In some spaces, I need to water down my disability, or I'm too disabled. In other places, I'm a loud, aggressive South Asian woman. I can't be South Asian, and I can't be a woman either. What policies impact us, and what institutional structures play a role in contributing to the role of exclusion? I leave you with this question today. As we know, around the world a few days ago, December 3rd was recognized and celebrated. Proclaimed by the United Nations, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is this day where governments, healthcare, and disability institutions worldwide challenge themselves to keep the promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And this includes, as we know, not only the right to health, but the many social determinants of health and disability to leave no one behind and uphold the rights of all disabled persons. This includes children around the world, children that we may forget about, and children that we see on our phone screens. We have a collective responsibility to ensure that disabled children are respected, included, and protected. I want to share a story with you about a single mom here in Toronto who fled a domestic abuse situation with her children, who all have autism. This mother and her children have faced severe trauma, and as a result, her children frequently run away. They have so much difficulty communicating, and they struggle with self-harming behaviors. They all live in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, and it's shared with other people. No families around to help them or friends. And when we met them at Smile, they didn't know where to go for help. But this is just one snapshot of one family amongst the 750 plus families that we support. And while our stories may differ from one another, we often see challenges they experience that are similar, such as ones that you have expressed to me today: poverty, discrimination, food insecurity, inaccessible housing, inadequate educational supports. So why am I here today? To talk to you about culturally responsive care and safe practices. What's the big difference? Many experiences I know from my own lived experience, as well as my time at Smile, many children are overlooked when receiving services and getting access to services. So many of the families we work with do not get the resources for so many reasons. They were not told about them. They were told in a manner they may not understand, predominantly in English or with difficult to understand language. And it might not even be a resource they can benefit from. Sure, you can offer me a summer camp, but if I can't get there, if it's a 2-hour drive away, there's no attendant care provided, and there's no funding, what's the point? You can go to the camp yourself. Cultural safety is when all people feel respected and safe when they interact with the healthcare system. Think about when they speak about what they're feeling, how much pain or discomfort they're in, where it began and what happened to them, presently and historically. Remember that trauma is generational. And it leads up to this point in their healthcare journey, locally and transnationally. Culturally safe health services are free of racism and discrimination, such as xenophobia and ableism. I will never forget when I was young and I was in pediatric care. I was struggling so much with my meals. I had a dietitian who did not understand my cultural food and my cultural background. Instead, she dismissed my family for feeding me my culture food and resorted to mainstream Canadian cuisine that did not meet my dietary needs, did not meet my family's needs, and certainly was not how my mother cooked. I grew up eating biryani and butter chicken. I grew up eating fresh cut vegetables, not peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And while they might taste good to you, and no harm intended, that was not my nutritional diet. And that was not what I needed. If I had a dietitian who understood my cultural background and who understood how my family eats at the dinner table, that it's not one plate of food we have. There's multiple little dishes, and each small dish has a significance to me and to my family and how we share our meals. I wouldn't have ended up back in the hospital. I would have been healthy. I would have had a better relationship with food. The lack of understanding there set me back. People are supported to draw strengths from their identity, culture, and community. And I quote this from a 2017 publication from Northern Health on supporting Indigenous health. I can link this as well. The ongoing narrative of exclusion of disabled newcomers, children, and their families drive us at Smile to go into communities locally and across the country and challenge these service providers to reevaluate their inclusive practices by examining narratives that highlight the intersectional needs and oppression of disabled newcomers, which will inform changes in policies and practices. Think about my story that I shared with you, about my struggle with meals and dietary needs. I think about families that maybe want to go into summer camp. You know, they don't know what summer camp culture is like here. They'd have to learn, what is summer camp? What do you do? What's the expectation? What do you pack? What do you bring? These aren't givens. Maybe to you and me they are because we grew up with them. But someone new to the country, they're assimilating in a culture where they already feel like they don't belong. They're trying their best to belong, but it's so difficult when the services that they're supposed to access, the providers that are supposed to help them, further assimilate them and leave them out of the major discussions and the major spaces we frequent. Now it's 2023, and I believe we know, admittedly maybe not enough, but we are well informed about social detriments of health and disability, about social constructions, their impact on identities. We know about human rights, holistic medicine, family-centered care, and anti-oppression, but we need to be willing to listen to the truth, the narratives of the children and their families who are before us. When I frequent spaces and I give talks and I give speeches, I'm often the only brown person there. I'm often the only Muslim person there, and that is very difficult for me. I've been coined as a loudmouth. I have been coined as too radical. I have been told that I need to be quiet because I'm still a student and I don't know what really goes on in this world. But discounting my experiences because I am not what the dominant narrative wants me to be, a white person, is excluding me. I am Canadian just as you are. I am just as Canadian as anybody else. I deserve access to my supports. I deserve access to care. I deserve access to education. And anyone in Canada who has a disability, it does not matter where they've come from. It does not matter their cultural background, what their identities are. At the bare minimum, every single person in this country or outside of it who has a disability deserves to be accounted for and deserves to have their human rights met, deserve to have food to eat, water to drink, access to healthcare, mobility aids. I struggled growing up in this country. I struggled growing up with service providers that would ask me at school, are you sure your parents care about you? I struggled when I was told that, you know, I won't get to be like the other kids. I struggled when I was told that I will always be second best. I accepted that I have to try harder than others because I am Muslim, because I am brown, and because I have so many intersections. I will always have to play the long game to get where I need to. And that in itself is so exclusionary. It is 2023. And as we talk about the importance and the need for increased culturally responsive support and resources for racialized communities with disabilities in Canada, it is important for us to have a collective understanding of these ideas and collective responsibility to ensure that racialized children and youth are not left behind, excluded, or an afterthought. I've given many talks like this at so many different points in my life. During the pandemic, when it first started, in recent days of the pandemic, before the pandemic. My tone has not changed. Rather, I have just been continually disappointed. I hope there comes a day where I no longer have to reiterate the sentiment that people are people and anyone with a disability, regardless of where they come from, deserves access to care. Anyone with a disability deserves access to education, to food, to water, and to have actual services that serve and protect them and their rights. I heard so many sentiments today of exhaustion, of overexerting your advocacy muscles. It is so tiring. I knew I had to be an advocate from a young age when I had a service provider tell me that, you're on your own, kid. That was essentially their sentiment to me. You've got to figure it out. You're on your own. You're a big girl. And I was what, 10? A 10-year-old is a big girl. A 10-year-old is a little girl. I ask that today you reflect on my sentiments of including racialized children and youth with disabilities. Think about who provides services for the masses of children with disabilities. Are they equipped? Are you equipped? Do you feel like you have more to learn or more you can learn from to ensure that the children and youth that you support are actually supported? Do you give them a safe space to tell you when they're not being supported and that they could use some extra help? I shared with you that I did not feel like I could say that. I felt like if I said that, I would get written off and cut off of my services because it's happened before. And who's to say it won't happen again? I appreciate your time. I appreciate your dedication to supporting people with disabilities. And most importantly, I appreciate this platform to be able to discuss me, Smile, the amazing work that we do, and just my identities in general. I will leave resource links to Smile and my email as well if you'd like to get in contact with our organization. And again, I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maria. And you're prepared to take questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's get some hands up here and we'll do the raise hand thing again. And I'll try and go to the chat once every other person instead of at the end of it all. So Michael, is there anything in the chat that is that's appropriate to be read at this point? Since there are no hands right now.
Not a question per se, but it was just a comment from Janet saying that very sorry to hear that you were expected to grow up faster than most kids were, and so that was the comment that she wanted to extend, and just doing this type of advocacy work. So let me just read it because I'm not sure I understand it. It says, everyone doing equity work without being intersectional risks excluding those of us living with disabilities. Not exactly clear on what that means, Janet, but
Janet can tell us.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, first of all, Maria, I'm honored to witness your resiliency, your strength, your wisdom, and the awareness that you have of your surroundings, the awareness that you have of the barriers that are not just that 3 steps in front of you, but the barriers that come from a system of oppression, from the capitalist and the colonial system that excludes people bit by bit, and in the end, we're all excluded. What I meant by that is that it's something that also Keith mentioned, that everyone jumped into EDI wagon because it was the thing to do. And now we have CEOs of EDI and VIPs of CEI and whole offices with big salaries. And equity is not equity unless it is accessible. Diversity is not diversity unless I see, and it's not just the representation of skin color, but if I see diversity of lived experience, if I see in healthcare people without an OHIP card, if I see that the fight for women's rights includes trans women. And for inclusion, they say inclusion is now being co-opted because someone with power will make the decision who to include. I, with power, will choose to include you, but not you. I will choose to include you once, so you can come and speak for 10 minutes. Or I will include you for as long as I need you, but I won't give you a job. You will only be a volunteer. I will include you, and I'm now using air quotes because I have stopped talking about inclusion as a single word. I speak of disability inclusion in the work that you do. You're doing housing, you're advocating for housing, accessible housing. You're advocating for food, accessible food banks. You're advocating for job, accessible accommodations. Anything that you are advocating for, environment, accessible priorities for those of us who live with disabilities. So it has to be a constant. We know, we live it. We need to be, I don't want to use this religious tone word like preaching, but really we need to be convinced that what we do and what we know matters. So in this case, that's exactly what I was saying, that we need to be intersectional. As an immigrant person, I can not only be advocating for immigrant people with disabilities like me, because there's a lot of people who have been living in this country before Canada was Canada and that are being excluded. And how is it possible that as an immigrant to this country, I can just go to my kitchen and have a clean glass of water? And Indigenous people, First Nations people, Inuit Métis, are still under water boiling alerts, not for a day or a week or a year, for decades. So this is what I mean by cross-disability solidarity. So that's, with that, I was just going to say, Maria, and if I can just put a question in there, because I'm really, I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. When, now that you're not 10 years old anymore, when someone challenges you, when you suggest this is the way to go, and somebody challenged you, do you have a system, a strategy, a way? Do you use a phrase? Because at the beginning of my journey, I was saying like, you've got to listen to me. And I was getting all angry. That didn't usually lead me to a lot of places. So now I said, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to disagree with you because, and then I, do that. So I don't know if you can educate me. I would love to hear and learn from you.
Oh, first, thank you so much for all your kind words and everything. It means a lot. I'm still kind of getting my bearings down. I'm only in my 20s and everyone still thinks I'm 15, so it is really difficult to speak up a lot of the times. I am often challenged a lot. I have a disability myself. I have a younger sister with a disability who has far more high needs than me, and I am her sole advocate with her needs, and it can be very challenging. Because I was speaking with the service provider yesterday, who had done me pretty dirty. I'll leave it at that. And I told them, this is your job. You will go home at 5 o'clock and you will sign out and you will sleep at night, not caring what happens to me. I will be awake. I will be, whether it's in pain, hungry, thirsty, whatever it is that you fail to do for me. So I hope you reflect on that moment of letting me wither away. And God forbid, if that is you one day, I hope then in that moment that you think of me and you think about the words I reiterated to you. For me, I always try to add a personal touch and say, I understand, you as one provider, it's not your fault, and that there are other people behind you, but you are a catalyst. And, in this moment, I may shoot the messenger because you are following the orders of someone who does not care about me. And that is not something I'm willing to accept. Oftentimes I'm dehumanized for being a Muslim person. Our families at Smile are incredibly more dehumanized for being refugees, for being immigrants. They're called loud, they're called terrorists, or every racist thing you could say to a Black or brown person. They've heard it. And, we really reiterate the fact that, like, you cannot operate as a country and say that you are inclusive, that you are equitable, that everyone is welcome here, because we're not. We're only welcome when we meet your status quo. You might like me as a Muslim, or if I put up a Christmas tree, or if I put up Halloween decorations, because I'm tolerating what you like. I'm ethnic, but not too ethnic. And I'm playing into your game. So I always reiterate to anyone that, tries to like push my boundaries, my family's boundaries, or the children I work with, their boundaries, that you need to respect their autonomy. Just like you want personal freedom, you want to be an individual, you need to let them be an individual. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that. Marcia, we cannot hear you.
That would help. Thank you. Yes, it's so wonderful when you mute yourself and then you forget you've done it. Okay. So right now I have no one interested in commenting. The panelists, you're all welcome to comment on Maria's discussion. Anyone who is interested, just to give everybody a sense of timing, we have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes.
So Marcia, there
something in the chat, maybe?
Yeah, Keith had a comment in the chat. I'm not sure it was a question or just something that he was throwing out to everyone, but what Keith wrote in the chat was, would love to hear from anyone who believes accessibility matters. Together we can make change. Please get in touch with us and let's connect, discuss how we can make change happen sooner rather than later. And he gave us emails.
Great. So maybe you could read out any of the email addresses in the chat for those who might want to write them down, or take them, or they'll be on the recording and then people can listen to them. That might be good.
Sure, I'll read out one of the emails and I'll see if there's anything else in the chat. So Keith's personal email is keithrashid@gmail.com, keith.rshid@gmail.com.
Okay, and we finally have someone raising their hand. Yes. David. Welcome to our little event here. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Maria, I'm so impressed with hearing you for the first time speak about young people and their rights to inclusion. Often young people are left out of some of the big organizations that are doing a lot of the advocacy work, and they need to become more part of that collective action because their voices, the future is theirs really to take on, right? So can you talk about ways that young people are being mobilized to kind of have their voices and their particular needs addressed in the collective advocacy work happening in the disability space?
Sure. Thank you so much for your kind words again and the question. So this is a story I like to tell because it is kind of funny and a bit more lighthearted about how I got hired at Smile. During the pandemic, I was very bored, just as anybody else was. I was making cloud bread on TikTok and watching a lot of funny videos, and I'm Gen Z, so we sprouted on TikTok, and I saw a lot of South Asian girls getting a lot of followers, and none of them had disabilities. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, there are these really pretty, conventionally attractive girls getting followers for their beauty videos, hair tutorials. And I wanted to do the same thing. I was like, oh, I'm just going to do it. I was locked in my house. I had a light ring that I wasn't using. I loved to do my makeup and my hair. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. So I started filming myself. what started off as a joke garnered me in 3 million plus views on my videos. It garnered me in getting radio asks, in getting filmed on CBC, on AMI, with Toronto Star, you name it. And I was like, oh my God, I was just doing this for fun. And then I started finally getting paid, underpaid and exploited by a lot of major mainstream institutions because of the fact that I was brown and I knew my white counterparts were getting paid like pretty pennies. And that's where my attitude shifted. And I started I would take walks every day, as anyone did in the pandemic. I was so bored. And I would film myself as I would drive in my wheelchair talking about various intersecting needs. And one of them I talked about was disability and marriage. I'm sure that brings a light bulb in your head. What happens when you get married when you have a disability. Your disability vanishes and you're happily ever after, or whatever the government wants us to think. I don't know. And I talked about that, and it garnered me like a couple million views. And from there, I met my executive director, Dr. Sakina Dada, and she wanted to meet with me. And from there, that's how I got hired, just through TikTok. I never had an interview. I was hired based on my own merit. And from there, I continued to push my narrative through TikTok, through Instagram. I'm a very fearless person. I will say and do anything. And I think that is a catalyst to me and my advantage, that I will push my limits. I will push my boundaries. Content creation is so fun for me. But I will say that if I'm not making an activist TikTok, I don't get the same views. I don't get the same numbers. And that speaks volumes of what able-bodied people think of people with disabilities in the media or in mainstream networks, that they are meant to be advocating. They are meant to be SJW warriors. I can't just do a makeup tutorial. I can't do a hair tutorial. When I'm applying my makeup, I have to talk about how much I hate ODSP or how the government gets on my nerves, and then maybe I'll garner a couple thousand views. It was very interesting to me when I monitored my numbers, what I had to look like, what I had to dress like, what I had to speak like to garner views. Like I said earlier, there's a double standard for me, and social media showed me the double standard of what I had to present myself as. I hope that answered your question.
That's great. And we have Pat, who has their hand raised. And last time I looked, you were muted.
I did press muted myself now.
There you go.
Okay. Thanks. I did press Alt A before too. Anyway, I think that there is a real possibility of a great deal of peer support in all of the people who we've heard today, and for all of the people who have had difficult times, who have had good times, who have had, and really inclusion is the whole thing. So I really think that there's a lot of peer support, and AEBC might want to do something with that.
Yes, we might.
And the other thing is that I really think that we should save the text chat, because there's a lot of really good information in there. Not only questions, but comments from people, emails, etc. And you won't have to go through a recording or whatever to get it. So if someone could save that, that would be great.
Yeah, it's been collecting.
Good.
And I think anyone who wants it can save it. I'm not quite sure how, because I've never tried, but it seems like every time there is a decent chat, I end up with a copy of it. So I think this one's not going to be any different. Wow. Well, I think what I'm going to do, just so that we don't end up getting so that no one else ends up getting interrupted, as we've got a hard 3:55 time when Joeita is going to come back and bring this to a close. So I'm just going to thank everybody for coming. I never said, well, actually, Minette said it a long time ago, one of my hats is the national president of AEBC, and the speakers that we've had this afternoon have been amazing, and we may call on you again for a different idea, a different forum, maybe just for our members, who knows, but it's been wonderful, and last minute crazy things happening aside, I think we've had a very thoughtful event, a very thought-provoking event, and yeah, we're slowly coming to 3:55, and
Marcia,
yes.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
The fact that everybody has talked and made reference to 2025 and so on. And I know for a fact that reporters are now looking at and doing series on disability and going through a person's life and all kinds of things like that. And we have to, I think, look for those opportunities when we can do that. We keep all parts of us open to the fact of, what's around us, what provides us the opportunity to speak out and to be able to use a reporter for good, for knowing what people can do with people with disabilities.
Yeah, and 2025 used to be a long way away, and it's it's not anymore. It's just over a year away. And we all know that Ontario is going to fail miserably in that quest to be completely accessible by 2025. It would take a miracle, and it's just not going to happen. But we can move forward, and every little bit counts, and everybody can make a difference. Khadija, you may be cut off, but try.
It's the who's unmuted you. Okay, hi. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring up something very small. I think maybe if we could have something like an accessibility or an AODA card with us, like a license laminated, and anytime you go to public service or restaurants, whatever, and they're not conforming to those laws, because these are laws in place and these are rights that we have. We can just flash that rather than going through a lawyer and everything, to say, this is not what you're doing is not AODA compliant. I think we need to push ourselves forward rather than always feeling, yes, it hurts, but I think we need to push ourselves to be visible and heard. And I love the work that Maria is doing. It's not, I think everybody has to think more youth centric and see how we can get in there and, make a difference, because these are our rights. These are our tax dollars. And we should not be just taking on these opportunities that somebody just mentioned with the journalists for free, because time is money and everybody else is getting paid. But people with disability, it seems like they're giving us charity to even be heard or seen. So I think that should also be addressed, that everything should be funded for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadija. Okay. As I said, I know 3:55 is now, depending on whose time you're looking at, and it may be 2 minutes away. It may be right now. My computer and we didn't sync our watches. Peggy, you want to try and get in before we get cut off? Go for it.
It's 3:55 now, if you'd like me to jump in. It's Joeita speaking.
Yeah, there you are. Okay.
Sorry, guys. Even popping out of the woodwork to say, okay, the party's over.
Sorry, Peggy. Oh, it's all yours, Joeita.
Do you want to take Peggy's comment?
Sure. Do we have time? I think we have time. Peggy?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say, as a longtime community advocate, long before, because I've had a physical disability since I was 32. But I also was a longtime community advocate, an elected official for 10 years. I worked in education and front lines of social services. And so going back to the AODA, I remember speaking with Dr. Butriani when we were just developing that bill and that act. And she and I had a very candid conversation. And her response to me was, you know, Peggy, this is going to take a long time to build, like just to build the act, just to build the bill. And we were going through consultation processes. And, you know, in that process, interestingly enough, you know, the intersectionalities were consulted, youth were consulted, a number of, and, you know, the intersectionality in that process occurred. Going forward, I just want to say that I'm very anxious. You know, I've spent 3 hours here today. I'm excited. I'm anxious to hear if there's going to be any actions going forward. What can we do to work together across our intersectionality to support and help one another? And I'm very glad to hear people say that our time is worth money as well. And thank you for saying that.
Thanks, Peggy. Okay, take it away, Joeita. Joeita?
Can't hear you.
No, AMI, you're muted. All right, can anyone hear anything?
Nope.
We lost you, Joeita. You were there and now you're gone.
So, Marcia, I'll text them in the chat, but maybe you can wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up because I want to thank our partners. That's what Joeita was going to do. So I'm gonna just quickly thank Access Travel Club, Accessible Housing Network, where am I going? Accessible Media, we just lost. AEBC, Baker McKenzie, Accessibility Hamilton Alliance, Barrier Free Canada, Canadian Council of the Blind Toronto Visionaries, Centre for Independent Living in Toronto, SILT, Ethno-Racial People with Disabilities Coalition of Ontario, otherwise known as ERTCO, or the Ontario Disability Coalition, Trailblazers Tandem Cycling Club, and Wood Green Community Services. These are all the partners that helped make this event what it was, and I thank you very much. And that's a wrap.